There are so many incredible individuals all around our country who are trying to make a difference. They're impacting their communities through their work, talents, and servant hearts. In this series, you'll get a chance to meet them. Welcome to 50 States, 50 Stories. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is episode 5 of 50 States, 50 Stories. Today's going to be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. One, it's the first episode in a few months, so it's good to be back. And also, two, instead of focusing on one state, we're going to jump around a little bit today and even travel outside of the states. I am so excited today to welcome a very good friend of mine. He started out as the assistant professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham and spent some time at Sam Houston State University before joining the University of Oklahoma faculty, where he served as the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. He left Norman to become the chancellor at Arkansas State University, where he was in that role for 5 years. And on April 21st of this year, he was named the 10th president of Texas State University. I am pleased to welcome my good friend, Dr. Kelly Damphousse, or Dr. D, as I call him.
Hey, Matt, how you doing? Great to see you again.
Good to see you too, Dr. D. How's everything going in Texas?
It's going well. It's finally starting to cool down a little bit. It's a little warmer in Texas than it is in Arkansas and in Oklahoma, and where you and I got to know each other really well. And but it's a great. We're having great fun being back in Texas. You know, I spent some time here. I went undergraduate here and went to grad school here, and my wife is from Texas, and so it is a bit of a homecoming for us, and so we're excited to be back here.
Well, that's great. Well, I want to start with my first question, just to talk about your journey back to Texas. So you were born in Canada, and so I want to hear kind of how from Canada to Texas and what happened in between.
It's a typical Canadian. It's not typical at all. There's no typical part of this story. I grew up in a little fishing village in northern Alberta, up in Canada, and I had no dreams of going to college at all. And then in February of my senior year, my dad moved us to southern Alberta, and it seemed like everyone in my high school, in my new high school, was going to college or university. For us in Canada, college is 2-year school and university is 4-year school. And I was like, I'd only seen like college in movies and stuff like that. Like, I didn't know anyone who actually gone to college. Now, I was silly because I know my teachers must have went to college, but to me, they never talked about it, so I never even imagined going. And eventually, I had this dream of being a police officer. Once I figured out I wasn't going to be a professional hockey player, and so I saw a poster outside my guidance counselor's office with a law enforcement officer on the poster and an advertisement for Lethbridge Community College. And so I said, oh, that's how you become a police officer. So I applied really late, like April or May of my senior year, and then went to community college, did 2 years there, got an associate's degree in law enforcement. Up there, they call them a diploma. And then I was only 19 when I graduated from college. I was too young to become a police officer. So I got a job as a prison guard. So I was working in prison. And once you get in prison, it's hard to get out, even as a guard. And I realized that my chances of becoming a police officer are probably pretty limited. And so I would just resign myself to the fact that I was just going to be a prison guard for the rest of my career. And one of my instructors found me one day and just, over a course of series of conversations, convinced me to go back to college. And I really measure my life before going back to school and after going back to school and getting that 4-year college degree, because I really was aimless and I had no direction. I wasn't very mature, wasn't very grown up, and I didn't have very many options because I didn't have a 4-year college degree. And when I went back to school, I was a different person. I was a little bit more mature, a little bit more grown up, and getting that 4-year college degree opened up a whole world to me. And the fact that I was doing it in a foreign country was also interesting, because I went to Texas to go to school. But I sold everything I had. I bought a motorcycle, drove down to Texas, was going to school, and I met a girl who didn't want to marry a cop or a Canadian. And so she talked me into staying in the States. We got married. And when we got married, I didn't have a green card. And she was like, how are you going to stay in the States here? And I said, well, I don't know what to do. And she said, you should go to graduate school. And I didn't know anything about graduate school at all. I barely knew anything about college. And she talked me on going to applying to graduate school. I ended up going to Texas A&M to graduate school, and I really was going to graduate school at kind of like as a placeholder, like I was trying to figure out the next step for me. But next thing you knew, 5 years later, I had a PhD, and so I just kept kind of plugging away. And I said, "Well, I've got this PhD. Maybe I'd go get a job somewhere." And so I got a green card and applied for a job. That's why I took the job at UAB, and then went back to Sam Houston, taught for a couple of years back at my alma mater, and then had a chance to have the best experience in the world going to Oklahoma and spending 20 years there, and had such great broad, experience there. Had lots of people invested in me over the time and gave me opportunities to get new experiences. And then the chance to go be a chancellor at Arkansas State came about in 2017 after 20 years at Oklahoma. And it was an unbelievable opportunity. I was scared to death. I was convinced that they would figure out how bad a mistake they made when they hired me, and that I would fall on my face. And as I left my house on the first day of the job, my wife said, "Don't screw this up." And I said, "Oh, great. Thank you for the confidence boost." And, but I was petrified that I was going to, not do well at it. But what a mentor once told me, "Don't fake it till you make it, fake it till you are it." And so I said, I'm just going to go out there and pretend I know what I'm doing. And next thing I know, a year had passed, I didn't get fired, and another year passed, and people seemed to still like what I was doing. And then COVID hit. We had to deal with COVID, but had 5 great years there. And then I got approached about this job at Texas State. And it's Texas State is the 25th largest university in the country by undergraduate population, 39,000 students here. It's in the middle of what we call the innovation corridor between San Antonio and Austin, and an opportunity to come to a much bigger university, even bigger than Oklahoma, almost twice the size of Oklahoma.
Wow.
And an opportunity to do something at the end of my career, as I approach my twilight years, as it would be, to do something really special at a really special place. And that's how I find myself in San Marcos, Texas.
Wow, that's awesome. And you talked a little bit about what your mentor said. That was going to be one of my next questions. Who would you consider some mentors in your life, and what's some of the best advice you've gotten along your journey to today?
That's a great question. I actually talk about these people all the time. I talk about the 5 people that changed my life, and each one of them was a teacher or a professor. And each one of them either said something or did something that caught my eye and that inspired me to believe in myself. And, the very first one was my 11th grade teacher, who was my 10th grade teacher before that. And so I had him for English 2 years in a row. And I was like my mom taught me to read as a very young person. I loved to read. I loved to write. And between 10th and 11th grade, though, I kind of had a little rebellious experience. And I'm not proud of some of the actions that happened that summer. But when I went back to school, I remember the first day of class, I was in his class, and he's a guy that I knew that I love this guy. I mean, he was the coolest guy in the world. And, but I just couldn't help myself. I was just being kind of an idiot in the back of class, and I was jacking around, and he said, "Mr. Damphousse, what happened over the summer that turned your brain to mush?" And I'm like, "Dude, I can't believe you said that to me." And I said, "I'm going to drop this class." And I was going to I didn't say that, but I was going to storm out of the room and drop the class as soon as I could. And as I was walking out the door, he stopped. He said, "Mr. Damphousse, come over here." And he sat on his desk, and I sat in the desk in the front row. And he said, "I embarrassed you, didn't I?" I said, "Yeah. Why'd you call me out like that?" I said, "Well," he said, "all these boys here don't have what you have. You have a gift. Like the fact that you like to read and to write, and that you're curious. If you wanted to, you could really make something of yourself, but you won't if you keep acting like this." And I went home that night. It was the first time an adult ever said something to me like that actually was very complimentary like that. Maybe a coach, my hockey coach, may have said something good like that, but it was about my athletic ability. And certainly my mom was very supportive, but moms have to be, right? But no other adult had ever done that to me. And so I said, well, maybe he's right. Maybe I could do better. And I would love to say that immediately I turned my life around. I didn't. It took me a long time to figure that out. I was still pretty immature. I was a year younger than everyone in my grade. So it took me a long time to figure out, how to be a a human being, let alone a man. And so, but the lesson I learned here was that people are listening and watching you all the time when you're in a position of leadership. Because I found him several years later. I went on the internet and I searched, I found his name and I wrote him and said, "Are you the Jim McNinch that was a teacher in J. Williams High School back in 1979? And he wrote back, said, "Yeah, that was me." And I said, "Remember that day that you said my brain had turned to mush?" And he said, "I have no idea who you are. I don't remember that moment." That moment to me was like a significant moment in my life, like one of the most important. I think about that moment all the time. I get goosebumps thinking about it. And he completely dismissed it like he had no idea who I was. And I waited too long to thank him. And that was another a lesson there. But the real lesson is that we're influencing people all the time. And he was influencing me in a kind of a stern way. It wasn't kind, like we didn't hug it out after. But it just reminded me that we're always being watched and we're always influencing people. And I always try to remember that he didn't realize the impact he was having on me. And in this case, it was good. Now I could have taken it the wrong way. But that was a great lesson there.
That's awesome. That is a great piece of advice for all of us. Definitely, always being watched, and how you can influence. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I want to talk just a little bit about time at OU because this is how we got to know each other.
Sure.
Your wife Beth was the first person me and my family met when we got out of the car to move in, because you all were our faculty in residence at Headington Hall back in the day. And I want to just talk about that experience, working and living in the same building and kind of creating this community and really impacting the students. When you hear the word community, kind of what goes through your mind, and how do you view community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll backtrack a little bit about why we became faculty in residence and build up to the answer. But when you go to graduate school, I went there, as I said earlier, just kind of as a placeholder. I didn't really have a plan. But eventually I said, well, I want to be a teacher. I guess I guess that's how people become professors. And to me, being a professor meant being a teacher. And I didn't realize being a professor meant mostly doing research, and teaching was kind of a side gig. And over time, I discovered that my graduate degree was almost exclusively about teaching me how to be a researcher and not at all about teaching me to be a teacher. And when I went to start working as a faculty member, it became very clear to me what was valued the most was my research and not my teaching. I didn't have any teaching classes. I never learned. No one ever taught me how to be a teacher. In fact, people didn't really care much about what I was teaching or if I was teaching. It was mostly about what I was publishing. And that's kind of a sad commentary on higher education in America today. But research was definitely the focus. And to me, I kind of lost my, I don't want to say innocence, but my desire initially had been to be a teacher, and that got kind of beaten out of me. And then my desire became to be a researcher. And that's where all the glory was, getting your name on an article, getting published, having people come to your conference sessions when you're presenting a paper and so on. And I lost kind of that value of the teaching and what happens between the student and a class and a professor. And as you know, at Oklahoma, they have a program for freshmen called Camp Crimson. And I got selected to be a namesake for Camp Crimson. They bring freshmen in and they do a lot of orientation. And you have these 3 namesakes, and each namesake has about 300 students that are broken up into 3 different groups and so on. And I started interacting with all these incoming freshmen, and I said, man, I kind of forgot that I got in this business to help these people. And so I said, I want to teach an introduction to sociology. In the past, I didn't want to teach introduction classes. That's for graduate students, for adjuncts. I want to teach graduate seminars and maybe the capstone class for seniors. But the value of a research professor was teaching graduate students and doctoral students, not teaching freshmen. But the Camp Crimson experience reminded me about my passion for young people going to college and about the life-changing experience that I had. I started seeing young people who are as petrified as I was as a freshman, and they were hiding it better than I was, because I was not hiding it well at all. I walked around with, like, everyone knew I was panicked the whole time because I had no filter. But I said, I'm going to start teaching introduction to sociology. And then I found out about the faculty in residence program, which is where a faculty member lives in a residence hall with a freshman dorm at OU. And I talked to my wife, our kids had graduated, they're off to college. I said, hey, this is a time for us to kind of reinvest in the ideal of higher education. She bought into it. She's way better. I'm kind of introverted. She's an extrovert, as you know, because you know her very well. And she said, hey, that sounds like fun. So we signed up to be a faculty and residence member in Headington Hall, and that's where we met you, and had great experiences. We had 387 students living in that residence hall, and she knew everybody by the end of the year. I knew most, about half of them at most. But you asked originally the question about community. And I love, when I think about the word community, I love breaking it down into parts. And it's about coming together in unity. And so what I love about community is bringing people together and trying to find a unifying spirit. And when we were faculty and residents, we started right on day one, on move-in day. We had a big celebration event, movie on the lawn, and we had, I don't know if you were there when we had the wild animals come in. So we had a petting zoo. This was before what's the name of that guy? The Lion King?
Joe Exotic.
Tiger King. Before Tiger King was famous, we had one of his competitors come in and bring his like pet tiger and stuff like that, and his lizards and so on, these exotic animals. And so we wanted kids to get out of the dorm and come out into the courtyard area and hang out with us and start to build community. And so we started doing late night waffle breakfasts, because that's what we did at our house. We would have our kids come together after church or late at night. We say, hey, let's have breakfast. We'd cook waffles and bacon up. And we started doing that in the common area. And the idea is for students to come out and hang around. And I love the fact that kids would come down wearing their pajamas in the lobby, and they would eat waffles and hang out with us. And I would sit with them. I wouldn't like sit with me and her together in our private little area. We would sit with them trying to build community. And we realized that when people find a home together in a place like a residence hall or a college campus, they feel more connected. They feel more engaged. They feel more engaged. They're more likely to stick around for a while and less likely to drop out of college and more likely to ultimately graduate. So building community on a college campus drives almost all of what I do when I'm thinking about student success, because trying to not replace their family and their friends from back home, but to create a new opportunity for students to learn how to create a whole new set of friends. And for many students, it's a fresh start too. You're not locked into what you were defined as in high school. If you were a jock or a nerd or whatever, you kind of start over again, and to give kids an opportunity to kind of start a whole U 2.0. And so that's what we're all about there, and trying to create community at Residence Hall. And if I miss anything about OU when we left there, the hardest thing was leaving Headington Hall, because we loved what we were doing there. We felt in many ways it was a mission for us. I don't want to get too spiritual about it, but we felt like that we were playing a role that was really important in some people's lives. But it was also selfishly really fulfilling for us to have those kind of relationships, to meet someone like you and to see you come in as a freshman. And I'm not sure if we want to talk about this later, but I'm going to jump ahead in our life with that, where you had this idea about starting a food pantry. And I said, dang, who's this kid coming up with the idea? And I said, food insecurity. What's food insecurity? And you taught me about food insecurity. And I said, dang, what can I do to help him build a food pantry? And to see you come in as a little 18-year-old freshman, and then 3 years later, you're running this food pantry with thousands and thousands of dollars of budget and managing volunteers and so on. To me, selfishly, that just completely filled my bucket to see kids like you do that kind of stuff. And that's why I loved building and living in part of that community.
Oh, Dr. D, thank you. Thank you for that. And I tell you, we miss having you here at OU. I got to tell you, and you're right. I was going to mention this too, because I wanted to thank you for all your help with that project. As we faced some challenges during that process, you and your team, Jenny Hill, really helped us get that project back on track. So it has been an incredible resource that has grown over the years. And so I wanted to say thank you. And the next question with that, as an administrator, when you see a project like that, and you talked about, filling your bucket, when you see students that take an idea and they run with it and it benefits campus or beyond, how's that make you feel? Besides, filling your bucket, and you already answered this, but seeing the future's got to be bright for our country, right? When you see students like this, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing that I love about my job is I'm close to 60 years old. I'll be 60 in March, and I don't feel 60 because I get to hang around with young people a lot. And last night we had a scholarship banquet for students who had gotten a certain this scholarship program, and I got to hang out with these students that are um, not just interested but interesting. And I always tell people, like, tell me your Texas State story. How did you get here? And to have them kind of tell the story, and so many of them coming from tough backgrounds like I did. Like I grew up in the trailer court, and so my mom went to grade 9 and my dad went to grade 12. And so I'm a first generation college student. I was a poor kid with no goals or ambitions and just kind of floating through life. And a lot of these kids come from the same kind of background. So I see myself in their eyes, but they were so much more prepared psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually than I ever was. And so much, I mean, I couldn't spend 5 minutes with myself at that age because I was just a turkey, that's an old fashioned saying for kind of like a dummy. And so, but these young people are, they understand the opportunity they're being given. They've been given this incredible gift and they appreciate it. And they know that what they're doing at this moment is going to have a life-changing experience, not just for them, but maybe for their siblings who will follow behind them, but certainly for their children and their grandchildren and so on. And they're making the most of it. And if I was them right now, I'd be sitting in my dorm room playing video games. We didn't have video games back then. I didn't even have a TV or a phone or anything. I was so broke, no cell phones, but I just wasn't thinking like they think. And they think like one of the students said, "Hey, I have a podcast. Do you want to be on my podcast?" I said, "Who has a podcast?" "Oh, I'm doing a podcast tomorrow with one of my former students." But
Oh, great.
they have businesses. They want to start businesses, and they want. One of them has a YouTube channel, and she did a little video with me. And I said, "You have a YouTube channel?" "Yeah, I actually make money on my YouTube channel." Like I'm so amazed by the innovative spirit and the drive and the capacity of the young people today. And it's easy as an old person who doesn't hang around with these young people to go, "Oh, the pink hair and the piercings and the tattoos and this generation not caring and so on." I don't see that at all. I can see past the pink hair and the all the stuff because part of that represents kind of a free spirit and not being locked in to being like everybody else, which I think is also part of the innovative spirit that we need in this country. And what I love about Texas State is this is a place you can come to and you don't have to like become like everyone else. You can be yourself here and become the version of yourself that you want to be, which I think is really cool.
Exactly. I've got just a few more questions for you. I know we're getting close on time, but kind of going back in talking about continuing with community. One thing that impresses me, I mean, just I saw it at OU and then following you at Arkansas State and now Texas State, is that you really get it building those connections with students. You are one of the most personable human beings I've ever met because you care. You can see that on any Facebook post where you're taking pictures with alums or students or doing things with the football team, anybody. I mean, you see the passion, you're all in. And from things like when you talked about the late night breakfast, or I've got an old picture of us from a costume party at Halloween. You were in your Canadian Mountie outfit, and I'm wearing like American flag suit or something, you do monthly videos to just inform the alums what's going on at the university. You've done golf cart rides with students like your first week of classes. You rode in on a motorcycle at a game. I mean, I love the passion. And when you talked about it, I mean, earlier, but making that connection is really who you are. And I really wanted to read these. I found a couple of quotes off of Facebook, some things that you posted that I wanted just to share with you. These are, I'm assuming probably some of the alums have said, but one of the quotes was, "Your devotion to this university and the students is refreshing." Another quote was, "I love how you engage in the San Marcos community. It's so awesome." Another, "Love seeing you everywhere, engage with students." And then the last one, "We love our new Texas State president. Eat 'em up, Cats." When you hear those comments, how's that make you feel? Because you are truly engaging with people.
Wow, thank you. Try not to get too emotional responding, but here I'll tell you I tell you how it makes me feel. It makes me feel humbled for the most part, and it makes me feel thankful because I had a great experience with a great mentor named Ben Crouch, who is my master's degree thesis supervisor. And when I was having my first child, he was my advisor. And I was actually going to drop out of grad school because I didn't get it. I was struggling. And the chair of the department was walking, we were walking down the hallway past each other, and she said, "How's it going?" Like, kind of like, "Hi," right? And I said, "Oh, I'm thinking about dropping out of college." It was like she was not ready for that. And we started talking. I said, "I'm just not getting it. I'm a criminal justice person and I don't get sociology." That was the PhD I was pursuing. And she said, "Have you met Ben Crouch?" And I said, "I don't even know who he is." And she said, "Well, he studies prisons and you used to work in a prison. So maybe you have something in common." It was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon on Friday afternoon. We go to his office. He's in there. She says, "Hey, Ben, would you talk to this young man? He's really struggling." And that meeting, and I should ask him if he remembers that meeting. He probably does. But that meeting was another turning point in my life. I literally was thinking about dropping out like the next week. And if Mary's eye hadn't walked by and said, "How's it going?" casually, and if I hadn't said, "I'm thinking about dropping out," my life would have been totally different. But he took me under his wing, and while I didn't have the closest relationship with my dad, and it was different because he's in Canada and I'm down here. But he became like a father figure to me, especially when I started going through graduate school. And so he just helped me get through some tough stuff. And so in 1991, as I'm nearing the end of my master's thesis, he and I are riding in a car together, and we're riding to Brownwood, Texas, to collect some data from some juvenile delinquents about Satanism. That's my master's thesis was on Satanism. And we get to Brownwood, and just as we pull in the parking lot, it starts pouring down rain. So we just sit in the car waiting for it to pass by. And he's mentoring me about being the difference between being a father and a dad. He said, anyone can be a father, but not everyone's a dad. Biologically, you become a father, but socially, you become a dad. And he was talking about this, and I was about to have my first child. And I said, "Boy, I'm going to have a boy, and he's going to play football and baseball, and he'll be famous, and I'll make a lot of money because of him," and so on. And he said, "If you're lucky, you'll have girls, because I think you're more of a girl dad than boy dad." And of course, that's what I had. I had 2 beautiful daughters. But it was kind of an emotional moment for me, because I'm kind of an emotional guy, and I was about to have my first child, and we were having this really deep conversation in the middle of a rainstorm. And at the end of it, I don't know why I asked him this, but I just felt like this emotional moment where I said, "Dr. Crouch, how can I ever repay you for what you've done for me? I don't even know why you're doing this. Why did you drive me over from College Station? Why'd you bring me in the car? And why'd you help me not drop out? I don't understand that. And how can I ever repay you?" And he said to me, it was kind of funny. His response was, "Kelly, you don't have anything I want, so there's no way you can repay me." And I thought, well, I was expecting more of a kumbaya moment here. But he did say, "Someday you'll be sitting behind the wheel of the car, and there'll be someone else in the passenger seat. I don't know where you'll be in your life, but you'll have the opportunity to do for someone what I did for you. And that's when you repay me, by not forgetting that." And so that's another moment. It's one of 6 or 7 moments in my life I'll never forget. I got goosebumps now thinking about it. A moment in my life where a mentor explained to me why he did what he did. He didn't do it for him. He was not investing in me so I would say nice things about him or that I would pay him back later on, but he was doing it because he wanted to help me. And he hoped that by helping me, I would be able to help other people. And you think about the tentacles of that, of all the people that he helped over the years, how they have all reached out. And by him helping 10 students, those 10 students helped 10 other students. And his gift was to 100 students out there. And so sometimes a student will write me a thank you note, and I'll say, "You should write Dr. Crouch a thank you note, because I did that because of what he did for me." There's countless times when students have asked me to do something, I'm like exhausted. And I never say, if I can be there, I'll never say I can't be there, because I think back to Dr. Crouch. He said, someday someone's going to ask you for something. And that's when you can pay me back. And to me, as an associate dean, as a dean, as a faculty in residence, as a chancellor, and then as a president, what people are looking for is relationships oftentimes. They feel like they're alone, they don't know who to talk to. And that's why I like when I first started this job in Texas State, like my first week was just meetings. I just met with people in my office. I said, I got to get out of the office. And so that's why I got in the golf cart, started driving around golf cart rides. So I wanted to meet people. And today I had this thing, I started this new thing called Kindle with K-Damp. So Kindle is a term for a group of bobcats. It's kind of a kind of a slang term for a group of bobcats. So we're doing this kindling together. And we just brought like 15 students together. They had to sign up to come meet with me. I didn't have an agenda. I just wanted them to talk to a president. And actually some of them were like asking about parking, and some of them had some tough academic questions. But then some, it's like, how do you become a president? Like, and I said, I'm glad you asked that. And so here's how it happened. If you want to become one, don't do what I did, because I didn't, this was not very well planned. But for them to walk away at the end of the day, having spent an hour and a half with the president, that's, I hope that's a memory that they can walk away with saying, I remember back in 2022, I got to hang out with the president for an hour, and I did that over lunch, and I skipped lunch doing it. And you know me, I can afford to skip a few lunches and stuff, but it was the only time I had that I could squeeze into there. But to me, there's no better hour and a half spent today than to invest in those young people, engage with them, and then they take something away with it. And I'll tell you, I'm going to cry if I say this. I looked down at one of our students' shoes, and she had written TXST, which is Texas State, and a heart and K-Damp on her shoe. And now, if she got a tattoo, I'd even be more impressed by that. But I thought, I mean, that made me feel like I'm doing something right. And again, I get kind of emotional thinking about it, that I'm fulfilling the pledge I made to the university when they hired me, to the students, the freshmen when I came here. I said, I will be there for you. And to Dr. Crouch, who did that thing for me, and for all the other people who invested themselves into me, that the 5 people or the 10 people that changed my life forever, that's a fulfillment of that pledge. And so it's a work of love and of appreciation and thankfulness and humility and humbleness, and all those things kind of wrapped together. And it's a thing that gets me up in the morning and keeps me up at night thinking about what can I do tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Well, you are making that impact, and I love to see it. I love to see all your posts on Facebook and see kind of what you're up to, and you just see that. The last question I've got for you, and I've done it on every episode, I ask my guests, if you could describe the word home in one word, what would that be to you?
Safe. That'd be the one word. To me, when you go home, you're safe. And again, try not to get emotional about this too. So it's an emotional day. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
So there have been times in my career when I felt, really challenged. Either faculty were upset about something and I had a really rough interaction with somebody, or I made a mistake in the classroom and said something I should have said it a different way, or I said something to offend somebody, or I messed something up. And I would go home at the end of that day, and my kids would give me a hug, and my wife would tell me, it's okay. It was just an honest mistake. You'll be all right. To have people, the home is not the building, it's not the space, it's the people who are in there. And there's probably 100 times in my life when I went home and my kids and my wife, without realizing it, rescued me from that day. Because we all have demons, right? We're all struggling, and I struggle more than anybody because I lack confidence, and I'm always worried that people are going to figure out that I'm totally faking it, and I'm always worried about what people think about me and so on. And for them to say, I don't care what people think about you, I love you because of who you are. And those people know me better than I can't fake it to death. Like, she knows me better than I know me. She knows me. And my kids know me, and they're just honest with me, but they love me unconditionally. And so I feel safe when I'm with them, and I don't have to I can let my guard down with them. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about Headington Hall, we tried to create a safe space for people. and I know we talk about safe spaces as if that's a terrible thing. What's a terrible thing about having a safe space for someone to create a place where they can be comfortable saying what they believe? There's nothing wrong with that. And so, so that's a great question. I've never been asked that question before. I hope that my answer made sense, because as I worked my way through it, I couldn't think of a better word to describe it.
Well, that's a great way to wrap up this episode. Dr. D, thank you so much for, I enjoyed this time. It was great to talk about some good old memories there, and just hear your story as well. And again, just thank you for who you are, for the impact that you're making. I know that Texas State, they already love you. They're going to love you the whole time you're there, because you're making that impact. So thank you for joining me on this episode. And thank you for everyone who tuned in to listen to episode 5. We'll catch you next time, and go out and make a difference. Take care.